My brother ruined the wedding cake I made, I didn't help him, and it exposed years of family favoritism and unresolved tension. I am a 28 female from a middle-class family in a small Midwestern town. My parents, Tom 58 male and Linda 56 female, worked tirelessly to provide for us. Dad was a high school English teacher, and Mom worked as a nurse at the local hospital. They instilled in us the values of hard work and humility, always emphasizing that character matters more than material possessions. Growing up, our house was modest but filled with love. We had weekly game nights where we gathered around our old, scratched dining table to play board games. Mom would make her famous chocolate chip cookies, and Dad would regale us with stories from his teaching days. Those nights are some of my fondest childhood memories. My older brother, Jake 32 male, and I were close as kids. We'd spend hours building elaborate Lego structures or exploring the woods behind our house. Jake was always the leader in our adventures, his imagination running wild as he created fantastical stories about the magical creatures inhabiting our backyard. Things started to change when Jake entered high school. He was always bright, but in his freshman year he really started to excel academically. His teachers praised his intelligence, and he began to win awards in various academic competitions. I was proud of him, but I also felt a growing shadow as Jake's achievements began to overshadow my own average performance. The real turning point came when Jake was offered a scholarship to Meadowbrook Academy, an elite private high school in the nearby city. It was a prestigious opportunity, one that our parents couldn't pass up. Despite the financial strain of additional expenses not covered by the scholarship, they took on extra shifts and cut back on expenses to make it work. From the moment Jake started at Meadowbrook, it was like he entered a different world. He made friends with kids from wealthy families, started using words we'd never heard before, and began to show disdain for our modest lifestyle. The first time he brought home a friend from school, I overheard him apologizing for our quaint house. I remember feeling a mix of embarrassment and anger. This was our home, the place where we'd made so many happy memories. As Jake's high school years progressed, the divide between us grew wider. He rarely joined our family game nights anymore, always claiming he had too much homework or plans with his new friends. When he did join us, he'd make snide comments about how provincial our traditions were. It hurt to see the brother I once idolized turning into someone I barely recognized. Despite the changes in Jake, our parents continued to praise his every achievement. They proudly told anyone who'd listen about Jake's perfect grades, his position as captain of the debate team, and the prestigious universities that were already showing interest in him. Meanwhile, my solidly average grades and participation in the school choir barely seemed to register. I tried not to be resentful, throwing myself into my own interests. I joined the school's baking club and discovered a passion for creating delicious treats. The kitchen became my sanctuary, a place where I could express myself and feel proud of my accomplishments. Mom would sometimes join me, and those moments in the kitchen became our special bonding time. After high school, Jake got into an Ivy League university on the East Coast. The day his acceptance letter arrived, our parents threw a big celebration. They invited the whole extended family, and Jake basked in the attention. I remember standing in the corner of our living room, watching as relatives fawned over Jake, feeling invisible. I stayed local for college, attending the state university just an hour's drive from home. I worked part-time at a local bakery to help pay for my education and to contribute to our household. Jake rarely came home during his college years, always claiming he was too busy with internships or networking events. When he did visit, he'd regale us with stories of his important connections and the luxurious lifestyle of his college friends. After college, Jake landed a job at a prestigious consulting firm in New York City. He moved into a sleek apartment in Manhattan, his life seeming more and more like something out of a glamorous TV show. Meanwhile, I had started working full-time at the bakery where I'd worked during college, slowly saving up money with the dream of opening my own place someday. Fast forward to now, I finally achieved my dream of opening my own small bakery in our hometown. It's been open for a year, and while it's not making me rich, it's doing well enough that I've been able to hire 2 part-time employees and even help our parents with some of their expenses. Mom and Dad have been supportive, often stopping by to sample new recipes or just to chat during slow afternoons. Jake, on the other hand, has continued to climb the corporate ladder. He's now a senior consultant, constantly posting on social media about his business-class flights, fancy client dinners, and expensive watches. His visits home have become even rarer, and when he does come, he spends most of the time on his phone or complaining about how there's nothing to do in our backwater town. Last month, our cousin Amy, 25 female, got married. Amy and I have always been close. She'd often join me in the kitchen during family gatherings, and we'd gossip while frosting cupcakes or kneading bread. When she asked me to make her wedding cake, I was honored and spent weeks perfecting the design. The wedding was a family event held in the renovated barn of Amy's fiancé's family farm. It was a beautiful, rustic affair with fairy lights strung across wooden beams and wildflowers in mason jars on every table. I arrived early to set up the cake and help with last-minute preparations. Jake showed up just before the ceremony, dressed in an expensive designer suit that looked comically out of place in the barn setting. Throughout the reception, he kept making loud comments about how quaint and folksy the wedding was, his voice dripping with condescension. I saw the hurt looks on Amy and her new husband's faces, but they were too polite to say anything. I tried to ignore Jake, focusing instead on celebrating Amy's special day. But things took a turn when Jake had a bit too much to drink. He started flirting aggressively with one of the bridesmaids, Sarah, 24 female, who happened to be Amy's best friend since childhood. Sarah was clearly uncomfortable, trying to politely excuse herself, but Jake wouldn't take the hint. At one point, Jake stumbled and spilled his red wine all over his expensive white dress shirt and suit jacket. He started making a scene, loudly complaining about how much the suit cost and demanding that someone clean it for him. People were staring, and I could see Amy looking upset on what was supposed to be her perfect day. Part of me wanted to help Jake, to save him from embarrassing himself further and ruining Amy's wedding, but another part of me felt like he deserved to face the consequences of his actions for once. So I stayed where I was, pretending not to notice the commotion. Things escalated when Jake tried to approach Sarah again. He tripped over his own feet and fell face first into the wedding cake, the three-tiered masterpiece I had spent weeks perfecting. The entire room went silent. Jake was covered in cake and frosting, looking absolutely ridiculous in his ruined designer suit. He looked around the room, his eyes landing on me. I could see the silent plea for help in his eyes, a glimpse of the brother I used to know peeking through his drunken haze. But I turned away, leaving him to deal with the mess he created. Our parents rushed to Jake's aid, helping him up and quickly ushering him out of the reception hall. I stayed behind to help Amy and her new husband salvage what was left of their wedding celebration. We managed to save the bottom tier of the cake, and Amy was gracious enough to laugh off the incident, saying it would make for a memorable wedding story. But as I watched Amy cut into what remained of the cake I had poured my heart into, I couldn't help but feel a mix of emotions. Anger at Jake for his behavior, guilt for not helping him, and a deep sadness for how far apart we'd grown. Am I the asshole for not helping my brother in his moment of humiliation, even though he's been insufferable for years? Should I have put aside my resentment and stepped in to help him, or was it right to let him face the consequences of his actions for once? Update 1. It's been about a month since Amy's wedding, and a lot has happened. I thought I'd update you all on the situation with Jake and how things have unfolded in our family. The day after the wedding, I woke up to a barrage of angry texts from Jake. He accused me of abandoning him and making him look like a fool. Some of his messages were barely coherent, a mix of drunken typos and bitter accusations. I didn't respond to any of them, deciding it was better to let him cool off before attempting any kind of conversation. Later that day, I received a call from our parents. Mom was in tears, and Dad's voice was tight with disappointment. They berated me for not helping Jake, saying I should have put aside my feelings and helped my brother in his time of need. I tried to explain my side of the story, but they were too focused on Jake's embarrassment to listen. The call ended with Mom sobbing and Dad telling me I needed to apologize to Jake. I spent the next few days in a fog of conflicting emotions. On one hand, I felt guilty for not helping Jake. Despite everything, he was still my brother. On the other hand, I was angry. Angry at Jake for his behavior, angry at my parents for always taking his side, and angry at myself for still caring what they thought. A week after the wedding, our grandmother, Nana Rose, 75 female, invited the whole family for Sunday dinner. Nana Rose has always been the matriarch of our family, the voice of reason in any dispute. She lives in the old farmhouse where my dad grew up, a place that's always felt more like home to me than our own house. I was hesitant to go, knowing Jake would be there, but I couldn't say no to Nana Rose. As I drove up the winding driveway to Nana's house, I was transported back to childhood summers spent running through her vegetable garden, helping her make strawberry jam, and listening to her stories about our family's history. Nana Rose was the one who first taught me to bake, patiently guiding my small hands as we kneaded bread dough together. The dinner started off tense. Jake wouldn't look at me, and our parents were giving me the cold shoulder. But Nana Rose, bless her heart, wasn't having any of it. After the main course, her famous pot roast that always reminds me of cozy Sunday dinners, she cleared her throat and addressed the elephant in the room. "Now, I've heard about what happened at Amy's wedding," she began, her voice firm but kind. "And I think it's high time we had a family discussion about respect and humility." What followed was an hour-long conversation where Nana Rose methodically broke down the issues in our family dynamic. She talked about how Jake's behavior had been enabled for years, how our parents' favoritism had created a rift between siblings, and how my resentment had built up over time. She reminded us of the values our grandpa, who had passed away 5 years ago, had always tried to instill in us. Grandpa had been a farmer, a man of few words but profound wisdom. He used to say, "A family is like a garden. You reap what you sow, and if you don't tend to all the plants equally, some will wither while others overgrow." To my surprise, Jake didn't interrupt or try to defend himself. He sat there, looking more humble than I'd seen him in years. When Nana Rose finished speaking, Jake did something I never expected. He apologized. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I've been a real jerk, haven't I?" The room was silent for a moment before I found my voice. "Yeah, you have," I replied, but without the anger I'd been carrying for so long. Jake went on to explain that the wedding incident wasn't the only thing that had happened recently. He'd lost his job at the consulting firm. Apparently, his behavior at work had been just as arrogant as it was with family, and his boss had had enough. He admitted that he'd been overcompensating at the wedding, trying to maintain the illusion of success. As Jake spoke, I began to see my brother again, not the arrogant, condescending man he'd become, but the vulnerable, uncertain person underneath. He talked about feeling lost, about the pressure he put on himself to succeed, and how empty his achievements felt. Our parents, to their credit, also apologized for their role in enabling Jake's behavior. Mom, tears in her eyes, admitted that she had pushed Jake so hard because she wanted him to have the opportunities she never had. Dad confessed that he had favored Jake because he reminded him of himself at that age, ambitious and eager to leave small-town life behind. As for me, I admitted that I could have handled the wedding situation better. While I didn't regret not rushing to Jake's aid immediately, I recognized that my inaction was partly driven by years of pent-up resentment. By the end of the night, it felt like a weight had been lifted. We didn't resolve everything in one dinner, of course, but it was a start. Jake asked if he could come by my bakery sometime, saying he'd like to see what I'd built. I agreed, albeit cautiously. As we were leaving, Nana Rose pulled me aside. She pressed a worn, leather-bound book into my hands, her recipe book, the one I'd watched her write in countless times over the years. "I think you'll make better use of this than I will now," she said with a wink. "And remember, family's like bread dough. Sometimes you need to let it rest, but you always come back to knead it with love." It's been a few weeks since that dinner, and things are different. Not perfect, but different. Jake has been making an effort to be less arrogant, and our parents have been more conscious about treating us equally. Jake has started coming to the bakery, not just to visit, but to help out. He's terrible at baking, but he's trying, and that means more to me than I can express. As for me, I'm trying to let go of some of my old resentments. It's not easy. Years of feeling second best don't disappear overnight, but I'm working on it, one day at a time. I know we have a long way to go, but for the first time in years, I feel hopeful about my relationship with my brother and my place in our family. I'll keep you all updated on how things progress. Update 2. It's been another 2 months since my last update, and I wanted to share the progress we've made as a family, as well as some new challenges that have arisen. After our family dinner at Nana Rose's, Jake and I started to rebuild our relationship. He's been coming to the bakery regularly, not just to visit, but to actually help out. At first, it was a bit of a disaster. He nearly ruined a batch of croissants, and somehow managed to get flour in places I didn't even know existed in my kitchen. But he's been persistent, and I have to admit, it's been nice having him around. One day, as we were closing up the bakery, Jake confessed that he'd always been a bit jealous of my ability to create something tangible with my hands. "All those years in consulting," he said, "and I never once got to see or taste the results of my work. But here, every day, you're making something real that brings joy to people." That conversation led to us starting a new tradition of Sunday brunches, where we take turns cooking for each other. Last Sunday, Jake attempted to bake cinnamon rolls from scratch. They were hilariously lopsided and a bit overdone, but the effort meant more to me than any expensive gift he could have bought in his old life. Jake has also started volunteering at the local community center, teaching basic computer skills to seniors. It's been heartwarming to see him use his knowledge to help others without any expectation of praise or reward. He told me that working with the seniors has given him a new perspective on what's truly important in life. Our parents have been making efforts too. Mom has started showing more interest in my bakery, even asking for baking lessons. Dad, who was always a bit distant, has been making an effort to connect with both of us equally. He's been helping me with some business planning for the bakery, and has been brainstorming ideas with Jake for potential new career paths. However, just as things were improving between us, a new problem arose. Our parents, particularly our mom, seemed to be struggling with the shift in family dynamics. About a month ago, we had another family dinner, this time at our parents' house. Jake and I arrived together, chatting amiably about a funny incident that had happened at my bakery involving a mix-up between salt and sugar in a batch of cookies. The moment we walked in, I could sense something was off with Mom. She seemed tense, her smile a bit too forced as she greeted us. Throughout dinner, Mom kept trying to bring up Jake's old job, asking if he'd heard back from any of his important connections. When Jake politely changed the subject, talking instead about his volunteer work, Mom's face fell. I could see the disappointment in her eyes, and it made me uneasy. After dinner, as Jake was helping Dad with the dishes, another new development, Mom pulled me aside into the living room. The room was filled with framed photos of our family, and I couldn't help but notice how many of them featured Jake's achievements, his high school graduation, college acceptance, first job offer. It was like a shrine to his past success. "Emma, don't you think you should be encouraging Jake to get back into the corporate world?" she asked, her voice low. "All this bakery talk and volunteer work, it's not really suitable for someone of his caliber, is it?" I was shocked. "Mom, Jake seems happier now than he has in years," I replied. "Isn't that what's important?" Mom shook her head, her eyes darting to a photo of Jake in his expensive suit from a few years ago. "But he had such a promising career, all that education, all those opportunities. It just seems like such a waste." I tried to explain that Jake was finding fulfillment in his new path, that he was becoming a better person, but Mom wouldn't hear it. She seemed fixated on the idea of Jake returning to his high-flying corporate life. This conversation opened my eyes to a troubling reality. While Jake and I were working on our issues, our parents, especially Mom, were struggling to adapt to the new family dynamic. They had built so much of their pride around Jake's corporate success that they couldn't see the value in his personal growth. Over the next few weeks, this became a recurring issue. Mom would make subtle and sometimes not so subtle comments about Jake getting back on track. She'd send him job listings for corporate positions and talk about connections she could leverage for him. One particularly tense moment came during a family barbecue. Jake was excitedly telling everyone about a group of seniors he'd helped set up email accounts for the first time. The joy on his face was palpable as he described how one elderly woman had teared up at being able to see photos of her great-grandchildren who lived across the country. Mom, instead of sharing in Jake's enthusiasm, simply asked, "That's nice, dear, but have you thought about using your skills for something more substantial? I heard the tech firm in the city is hiring." The light dimmed in Jake's eyes, and I felt a surge of protectiveness I hadn't experienced since we were kids. Before I could say anything, though, Dad stepped in. "Linda," he said gently, "I think what Jake's doing is pretty substantial. He's making a real difference in people's lives." It was the first time I'd seen Dad openly disagree with Mom about Jake's choices, and the tension was palpable. Mom pursed her lips, but didn't argue further. Jake, to his credit, has been handling it with grace. He gently but firmly tells Mom that he's not interested in returning to that life right now, but I can see the strain it's putting on him and on his relationship with our parents. Dad seems more accepting of Jake's new path, but he doesn't always stand up to Mom when she starts pressuring Jake. It's creating a new tension in our family, just as Jake and I were starting to heal our relationship. I'm torn about how to handle this. On one hand, I want to support Jake in his journey of self-improvement. On the other hand, I don't want to create more conflict with our parents, especially when we've just started to address our past issues. Jake and I have talked about it, and we're both at a loss. We're considering having another meeting, maybe with Nana Rose present again, to address this new challenge. But we're worried about how Mom will react. As always, any advice would be appreciated. How do we help our parents, especially Mom, accept and support Jake's new path in life? Update 3. It's been another month since my last update, and I'm happy to report that we've made some significant progress in our family situation. After much discussion, Jake and I decided to confront the issue with our parents head-on. We invited them, along with Nana Rose, to my bakery after hours for a family meeting. We thought the neutral territory might help keep things calm. The evening of the meeting, I was a bundle of nerves. I spent the afternoon stress baking, resulting in an abundance of cookies and muffins that I set out on the tables. As everyone arrived, the bakery filled with the comforting aroma of freshly baked goods, a scent that always reminds me of home and family. The meeting started tensely. Mom was defensive from the get-go, insisting that she only wanted what was best for Jake. Dad mostly stayed quiet, but you could see the conflict on his face. Nana Rose sat quietly, her wise eyes taking everything in. Jake spoke first, calmly explaining how much happier and more fulfilled he felt in his new life. He talked about the satisfaction he got from his volunteer work and how he was exploring starting his own small business, inspired by my bakery's success. "Mom, Dad," he said, his voice steady but emotional, "I know you wanted the best for me, and I appreciate everything you've done. But the corporate life, it wasn't making me happy. I was stressed all the time, I barely slept, and I felt like I was losing myself. Now, for the first time in years, I feel like I'm doing something meaningful." I shared how proud I was of Jake's personal growth and how our relationship had improved. I also expressed my frustration with Mom's constant pressure on Jake to return to his old lifestyle. Mom didn't take it well at first. She became emotional, saying she couldn't understand why Jake would throw away his education and opportunities. "We sacrificed so much to give you those chances," she said, her voice breaking. "How can you just walk away from all of that?" That's when Nana Rose stepped in her wise, no-nonsense way. "Linda," she said, "what's more important to you, Jake's resume or Jake's happiness?" That question seemed to stop Mom in her tracks. For a moment, she was speechless. Then, to everyone's surprise, she started to cry. Through her tears, Mom confessed that she had always felt insecure about our family's modest background. Jake's corporate success had been a source of pride for her, a way to prove that our family could make it in the world. The idea of Jake stepping away from that life felt to her like a step backward. "I just wanted you to have everything I never had," she said, looking at both Jake and me. "I didn't want you to struggle like your father and I did." It was a breakthrough moment. For the first time, we all understood the root of Mom's behavior. Dad, finally finding his voice, admitted that he had gone along with Mom's pressure on Jake because he didn't want to disappoint her, even though he personally was proud of Jake's new path. "I see now that we were so focused on external success that we forgot about what really matters," Dad said, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm sorry we put that pressure on you, Jake. And Emma, I'm sorry we didn't appreciate your path as much as we should have." The conversation that followed was honest, emotional, and ultimately healing. We talked about redefining success, about the value of personal happiness over societal expectations. Mom began to see how her actions, though well-intentioned, had been harmful. Nana Rose shared stories about our family's history, about great-grandparents who had weathered the Great Depression, about Grandpa's decision to become a farmer despite his own parents' disapproval. "Our family's strength," she said, "has always been in our ability to forge our own paths and support each other no matter what." By the end of the night, we had come to some important agreements. Our parents would respect Jake's choices and not pressure him about his career. We would have regular family meetings to check in and address any issues before they became major problems. We would all work on expressing our feelings more openly and honestly with each other. We would focus on supporting each other's happiness, rather than trying to live up to external expectations. As we were cleaning up, Mom approached me. She picked up one of the cookies I'd baked earlier and took a bite. "These are wonderful, Emma," she said softly. "I'm sorry I haven't appreciated your talent as much as I should have. Would you be willing to teach me how to make these?" That simple request felt like the beginning of a new chapter in our relationship. In the weeks since that meeting, things have improved dramatically. Mom has stopped sending Jake job listings and has even started showing interest in his volunteer work. Last week, she surprised us all by asking Jake to teach her some basic computer skills, just like he does in his classes at the community center. Dad has become more vocal in his support of both Jake and me. He's been helping me with some business planning for my bakery and brainstorming ideas with Jake for his potential new business venture. As for Jake and me, our relationship continues to grow stronger. Our Sunday brunches have become a highlight of my week. Last Sunday, Jake attempted to bake a pie from scratch using one of Nana Rose's old recipes. The crust was a bit tough, and the filling was runny, but we laughed together as we ate it, making plans for his next baking attempt. There are still moments of tension, old habits that slip through now and then. But now, instead of letting them fester, we address them openly and work through them together. I know we still have work to do, but I'm incredibly proud of how far we've come as a family. Jake's embarrassing moment at Amy's wedding, as unfortunate as it was, turned out to be the catalyst for real positive change in our lives. Thank you all for your support and advice throughout this journey. Your perspectives help me navigate these challenging family dynamics. While we're not perfect, we're learning and growing together, and that's what really matters.